We're talking CDC guideline change. So this is kind of funny to me in a way, Clay. I have to be honest, because my first reaction when I saw this was to go, is anybody paying attention to those still? Who's listening to that? And then I remembered, wait, there are still people walking around with masks on. So yeah, there are people who are paying attention. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was funny to me. I had the same kind of reaction. Like, are we haven't heard from the CDC in a while. Like, this is, odd, but folks, this has to do with COVID, and it's the new COVID guidelines. And, there are businesses out there that still abide by these things, especially when it comes to, do they have to pay people for time off, and what are their own internal policies when somebody tests positive for COVID?
Right.
And the quarantine that's been required and all of these other things. So the new CDC guideline is, if you don't feel sick and you're not showing symptoms, whether you test positive or not, you don't have to stay home. So basically, COVID is now a cold. That's where we're at. It is a cold.
That's quite a jump from just a couple short years ago that we all still have trauma from, which was what the 10-day isolation period was, what their recommendation was at the time. Besides the complete lockdown and shutdown of everything, the entire universe shut down and was locked away for fear of this scary.
Except Walmart and grocery stores. Now that was okay. We were fine with that.
That was okay.
We had plexiglass, which did absolutely nothing.
Right.
Everybody wore a mask. Remember the little feet on the floor? This is all going to become like, when we're about 20 years from now, we're going to have like that. Those are going to be whatever the meme is, whatever that medium is 20 years from now. That's what you're going to see. You're going to see 2 green feet on the floor. Yep. Or like a double-ended arrow that says 6 feet or something like that. And it's like, if you're old enough to know what this is, you can drink now, or you probably need a colonoscopy or something like that. All of those things are going to come back to haunt us. It's going to be all those images.
Yeah, you are so eerily right. That is so accurate of what's going to happen, what it's going to be. It's going to be like part of a drinking game or something. Yeah. And I remember the one of so many things got me scratching my head, but one of the things I remember really kind of changing my perspective, because I was like I think in the very beginning, we were all scared. We were all scared, which is the whole point, that how it got to the way it was, and the way people still are, some people. But then you start seeing things, and you're seeing people with surgical gloves on, with their latex gloves on and their mask, and they're walking into the store, and they're like reaching their hand underneath their mask with their glove on to like scratch their nose, and then they're picking up something and handing it over, and some other person. And it was like one of those moments where you kind of went, hang on, I'm not a doctor, and I might not be the brightest person in the world, but even I'm sitting here going, that doesn't really seem right. Like, if this is as bad and as scary as they're saying it is, and I'm not saying people didn't die, I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying some things did not add up. Like, where are all the biohazard waste containers to put those gloves and masks on? Because I'm pretty sure I saw a lot of them in the parking lots all over the place. So people are fun.
I'd be willing to bet the 2 biggest pieces of trash, for years it was the plastic bag, but I bet now if you go to the landfills, the 2 biggest things you're going to find are masks and gloves. Without question.
I think you're right.
They're going to be everywhere. They are everywhere, and we went to the non-disposable, the t-shirt material, just because it was comfortable.
Right.
I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, flying just started to become normal again. People were still, I think it was kind of on the edge of, you didn't have to wear a mask on a plane anymore. But I looked over and I looked down the aisle, and a guy like I think he was across the aisle, so maybe 3 seats over, and the window was open, and he had a mask on his face, but it was a screen. You could see right through. You could see the light through it. And I'm like, we've lost our minds. Like this is we have become so dumb at this point. It's not even funny.
Yes.
But this is, you know, this is what research does, and this is how much time research takes. And I understand that we made a lot of decisions then based on a lot of bad guesses. You know, we the ventilator thing turned into that was just a tragedy. You know, oh my God, they come in the hospital, they get diagnosed, put them on a vent, and it ended up that was killing them. That was literally killing people.
Literally.
But this, you know, we did the vaccines with no research. We did the vaccines with no testing. We did, you know, and then they were mandated, you know, and then we said, you know, the grocery store was okay, but church wasn't okay. You know, we did all of those things that we did. Were all knee-jerk reactions. Every one of them was politicized. You know, doctors, you know, when you've got doctors divided on how to handle a medical issue, and I'm not talking one or two, I'm talking clear lines of division across the entire medical community about medication, no medication, vent, no vent, you know, immunization versus not, you know, the vaccine versus not, all of those things. And there are so many people, as you pointed out, who still to this day, you see them driving by themselves in their car with a mask on.
Walking their dog out in the fresh open air. To me is like...
Yeah, it's been a couple of months, and they have said, unless it's an N95, it does nothing. Surgical mask, t-shirt mask, they've come out and said it. It does absolutely nothing. I still see people every day wearing a mask and knowing publicly, you know, that it does nothing. Still wear it. It's crazy.
Yep. I just saw somebody. Well, I mean, I see lots of somebody's, but I noticed this woman in particular in Trader Joe's yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. And yeah, it's just sad. You know, I can't even, it's hard, you know, I make fun. I won't say you make fun. I make fun. I say, look at this one, you know, all that stuff. But, you know, when it comes down to it, really, it's so sad to see what this has done to people, to their mental health, to, you know, to their psyche. And it is really, really sad. I remember one of the things that really, really struck me, like when we first started getting let out of our cages, you know, and like blinking at the light, you know, when we started congregating again in places, in just like a short period of time, a matter of months or a year, we'll say a year, how much people physically changed. That blew my mind. Like people that we used to see every week, you know, I've mentioned before that my husband, you know, plays drums on the side. He's in a couple of bands, and we used to go all the time, every single week, couple of times a week, few times a week, to either open mics or see other bands play, all that kind of stuff. So these were people we saw every single week, and then we didn't see them for like a year, basically. And the first time we all started getting back together again, it was shocking. They were so aged. And I'm not saying that we weren't, you know, maybe we were, I don't really know. I wasn't, obviously.
Sure,
of course, everybody else was. But they were so aged by the whole thing. And that was so sad to me to see that. And you see it everywhere. That's the case, you know, it's just depressing, very depressing. And, you know, seeing the comparison of like the things that we know now, the things that a lot of people were saying all along, and we're getting, you know, ostracized for saying it and banned and blocked and, you know, villainized for, and now we're all coming to light. Now they're saying, yeah, well, actually, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And there are still people, though, that don't know this. Like, I think they don't know this, or they refuse to admit that they know, because then they would have to basically apologize to all the people that they were like horrendous to. I know people, and I'm sure we all do. You probably know people as well. I know people whose families that used to get together all the time, very close-knit families, don't speak anymore because of that because of COVID, because of the vaccines, differing opinions, and like this drove families apart, among many other things. It's sad.
And I'll tell you that, it's one of those things that I keep seeing float around social media, and it is as true as anything else that's out there. And that is, remember everything that happened from the beginning of the pandemic now, and remember that when November rolls around, because it's the
Yes.
same people, the people who dictated how you had to live your life, where you could go, shut down businesses, put people out of work, and now are claiming that they've generated all these new jobs that they destroyed in the first place 3 years ago, right? It's all the same people. And I don't care what party it is, because they were all colluding together on this. Maybe a little bit more on one side than the other, but if they were in government at the time and they didn't fight on the daily to stop the madness, then they're complicit like everybody else. But
I agree.
We all need to remember that when it rolls around in November, who is responsible for this, and because this is, for an entire generation of people, this is a calendar mark event. Like, where were you? How old were you? What school were you going to? What was your job? Like, it's not an incident like Kennedy or 9/11 or Pearl Harbor or something like that. This is a Great Depression, right? Pandemic, kind of a thing that we all are going to remember. But we can't let it fade from our memory when it comes to how our own government treated us and what it did to all of us and our livelihoods, and restricted our jobs, and the impact on our children who were in school at the time. All of those things. We can't forget this when it comes time to vote in November. Look it up. Look up the voting record of your representation, blue or red, don't care. See how they voted when it came to COVID related things, and make sure that they understand that you're not going to tolerate that crap again, because after this election cycle, God knows what's coming around the bend.
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% true. And I know it in my bones that there is going to be a next thing, and they found out the most important thing, the most important takeaway for those people, we're talking about these elite people in power, is that yes, you can control the masses. You absolutely can. You scare them enough, and you have control. Can they do the same thing? I don't think so. You can't pull another COVID on us, because I think there are enough people now that will say absolutely not doing it, not buying it. So they will come up with something else. There will be something else. And I know I sound like one of the conspiracy theorists, get my tinfoil hat, but I don't think I'm wrong. So there.
Listen, you don't have to dig. You don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole to find things to be suspicious of. I mean, how many, railroad derailments have there been? How many food processing plant fires has there been? The wildfires in Texas right now, the fires in Hawaii, like all of that. There's so much of that stuff going on that is different from any time in the past. You can't help to be at least somewhat skeptical. Like you said, it's not full out tinfoil hat kind of stuff. You can not explain away, but you can put some credence behind, infrastructure not being maintained like it should be, the railways and those kinds of things. But again, even if it's not conspiracy, even if it is fact and they just haven't been maintaining the railways, whose fault is that? It's the federal government. So it doesn't matter if they did it on purpose or it's due to negligence, it's still their fault. So, there's still responsibility that has to be maintained, and we all know where it lies. It's amazing the people who believe in big government and support big government, except when it's time to blame the government, and then they don't think so. And it's amazing to me, but yeah, we'll all have to sit by and watch, and figure out what's coming next, and just continue to be vigilant, be skeptical. That's all we can do.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that is really the key takeaway to keep a very healthy sense of skepticism in your pocket at all times, in all things. Stop believing everything you've seen. And, more so than ever, the past couple episodes we talked about, and we won't go into it, just touching on it very quickly. We talked about AI, all this artificial stuff that you can basically deep fake anything and anyone at any time. The internet is filled with fake news, basically fake things, fake everything. Be skeptical, for goodness sake. It's beyond necessary at this point.